Well, we have a quorum, so we'll go on to start our business. Just a few reminders, if you have a cell phone, please turn it on to vibrate or turn it off. And as you address the chairman, please state your name and what organization you might be from. And go through the chair at all times, and you can address me as Chairman Steinmetz or Vice Chairman Steinmetz, and then address the other senator that you're speaking with. I'm sure you're all old pros at this. And so without further ado, our first Senate file for consideration is Senate File 48, Education Suspension and Expulsion Model Policies. I see that Senator Ellis is with us this morning. Were you prepared to present that bill today? The second bill. Okay. So for the first bill, I would call on Senator Rothfuss since he was here in the interim.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, Senate File 48 was a product of the interim Joint Education Committee work. We had as one of our interim topics suspension and expulsion, and talked quite a bit about it with school districts trying to examine what policies they had in place, what practices were used. We tried to get some data on it, and one of the things that we actually found was that it's a little bit difficult to get uniform data. So we got some data and some anecdotal reports, and I honestly think we had a very good conversation in the interim. But one of the things we found was that different districts were doing different things well, different districts were doing different things not quite as well. And so what we arrived at as a committee was the idea that developing some uniform policies and standards for how suspension and expulsion could or should be handled at the department level, and then providing those as an opportunity to consider by the school districts without mandating that they utilize those was really the best approach that we saw, at least as a first step. I think it ended up with general universal support based on the work and the testimony that we heard. So that's what we have before us, is a simple revision to statute, adding to the duties of the state superintendent an additional Romanette, which I think is like 41, maybe, XLI. Anyone good at Rome? No? Anyone? XLI? Mr. Farmer agrees with my 41 assessment. So we add a Romanette 41 to develop model rules and policies outlining best practices for the reasonable punishment and discipline of students as authorized elsewhere in statute. Shall include best practices for suspension and expulsion of students in accordance with statute. And key provisions that we came to was the emphasis of what we need to prioritize, which you'll see that the model rules and policies, you can see that that says polices. We should probably change that to policies. So I'm going to go ahead and end up with an amendment on line 6. The model rules and policies developed by the state superintendent under this paragraph shall be designed to maximize student retention and academic success. And then you see the final paragraph gets at the fact that nobody's obligated to use these rules, but we wanted to make sure they were available, recognizing that some of our larger districts had already had the capacity to put together some pretty good policies and rules, whereas perhaps some of our smaller districts didn't have the wherewithal to do so. So that's the intent. It's relatively simple and straightforward. Section 2 gets at an initial date of not later than July 1st. The state superintendent shall develop those model rules and policies, and then not later than July 1st, 2023, the superintendent shall report back on those as created by the act. And Section 3 puts this immediately into effect so that the superintendent can get started immediately upon passage on developing those by the timeline.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss, for your good explanation of the bill. Is there anyone from the superintendent's office that would like to testify on this bill today? Seeing none, any other agency input? All right. Seeing none, is there any public comment on this bill today? Public comment? Is there anyone on Zoom today to comment on this bill?
Yes, there is.
There
Senator
is one
Steinmetz.
on Zoom. Would you please admit them?
I have just allowed Ms. Donna Sheen into the room. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Sheen.
Welcome, Ms. Sheen. Please state your name and if you're with an organization, and go forward with your public comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Steinmetz. I am Donna Sheen with the Wyoming Children's Law Center, also a member of the Wyoming Youth Justice Coalition. Both our center and the coalition strongly supports this bill. Our coalition had actually asked for this topic to be studied by the committee during the interim. Currently, our suspension and expulsion statutes, excuse me, give school districts very broad discretion to suspend or expel children. Doesn't set any age limits or clarify offenses very well. It's so broad, in fact, that it essentially eliminates a parent's ability to exercise their due process to challenge that question when they feel it's being used inappropriately. Because children have a constitutional right, obviously, to a public education in Wyoming. In fact, our center frequently hears from parents who felt that the school used that discipline inappropriately. And I usually have to tell them that the law essentially makes it nearly impossible to challenge that decision because there's no structure in place to determine what is or isn't appropriate. So originally we had asked the school district this committee to consider looking at the use of suspension and expulsion and gather or examine some uniform data, which Senator Rothfuss, excuse me, indicated was kind of problematic. And so I think this is an excellent first step to help us identify where problems exist in the overuse of exclusionary discipline or the inappropriate use, because it establishes a standard that will guide schools in the use of that. And when there's a standard, there is at least an opportunity for the parent to compare the situation to the standard and gives them a better opportunity when they feel like it's been inappropriately administered, right? It's also important because exclusionary discipline has been extensively studied and it doesn't work. It doesn't improve school safety. In fact, there's mounting evidence that the use of suspension and expulsion can actually heighten the safety risks in that school because it creates a negative punishment-oriented model that oftentimes will create the environment where children act out. It also increases the likelihood of negative outcomes for that child. Their life outcomes like stable employment, suicide risk, mental health challenges when they become an adult. And once it's used, the student is more likely to receive multiple suspensions. So it actually increases the likelihood that the behaviors will continue. Usually, they're often behaviors that are later recognized as a manifestation of a disability that the school had not yet identified. So it increases also the likelihood that they'll be referred to the juvenile justice system. And once involved, it really presents a huge challenge for courts when a school has expelled a student because the court is concerned about getting them an education, and this creates a huge barrier to being able to help that child out of the juvenile justice system into a more healthy lifestyle. So I know that you have a lot to do during the interim, and so I'll pause at that. I want to thank you for your time and work on this important topic, and I would stand for any questions the committee might have.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Is there any further public comment in the room? All right. Oh, yes, we do have one. Come on forward, one at a time, or together if you're together.
I wasn't intending to speak on this one, but kind of got compelled to after the last testimony. My name is Kathy Sigliano. I am a parent of LCSD1, and I'm also the chair for our local Moms for Liberty. After just kind of hearing what the previous speaker talked about, it sounds more to me, and I did not read this bill fully because, like I said, I wasn't planning on talking on this one, but it sounds to me a lot like a cop-out. If we are not going to expel or suspend students that have had multiple behavior issues within the school that they are attending, I disagree that it will impact them. I mean, it will impact them negatively, but I think there should be consequence. When I was growing up, you were lucky to get 2 chances in school if you were misbehaving or making threats or harassing other students and or teachers for that matter. So I will kind of go to the case that we just all saw play out on TV with Nicholas Cruz from Florida and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I have followed a lot of that in regards to that student, and the school system failed him, and they failed all of those students that were killed that day. He had multiple infractions. They did nothing about it. They swept a lot of it under the rug. They did not expel him. They tried to send him to a different school, which then in turn sent him back to the high school. And then he shot and killed several students that day and teachers. I definitely do not want to see that happen here. I will be talking on the second bill, which will kind of go in to play with this, but harassment, intimidation, threats that these kids are making on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, they need to have consequence. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee today? Questions from the committee? Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. All right.
Mark Moody, I'm also a member of Moms for Liberty. Good morning, Ms. Vice Chairwoman, members of the committee. My only problem with this bill is that if we do have a superintendent of public instruction that will not implement suspension and expulsion, we can have problems. I know Laramie County School District #1 here, we are having some issues as well, especially with what's recently happened. And we know that, they were, under the radar, but they weren't disciplined for it. So that's pretty much all I would say more on a local level, is that we have the problems here and they're not addressing the issues as well. And I know with our new school board, they're probably going to try to take care of it. But again, if there's someone from the state saying you can't suspend or expel, it can create even more issues. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions for Mr. Moody? All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
both. Any further public comment on this bill? Seeing none, committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Senator Rothfuss, seconded by Senator Beitman. Are there any amendments to the bill on page 1? Page 2?
Madam Chairman, I move that on page 2, line 6, that we change policies to policies.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Senator Brennan, seconded by Senator Rothfuss to change the word policies to policies. And all those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion to amend passes. Are there any further amendments to this bill?
Madam Chairman, I move that on page 3, line 4, that A be replaced with as.
Page 3, line 4. A be replaced with as. Okay, that's a technical correction. I don't believe we actually need but let's go through the exercise of that. It has been moved by Senator Brennan, second by Senator Rothfuss. All those in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion to amend has passed. Any further amendments on this bill? All right, good job. Committee discussion on this bill, committee? Senator Rothfuss.
Just briefly to address the welcome testimony that we heard, and I appreciate the public testimony. A lot of what was provided in that testimony was part of the discussion, and I think that either both of you or at least one of you was involved in some of our meetings during the interim. But the idea of providing guidance in best practices as opposed to explicitly saying thou shalt is largely motivated by the concerns that were expressed, so that the superintendent would not be telling school districts what they can and can't do, but hopefully working together, as we've seen in the past, with professional judgment panels that come together and look around the country and the state and figure out what best practices are for expulsion and suspension and disciplinary procedures, and then use that information to build a model set of guidelines that either can or don't have to be used. But I think to address the very concerns that were raised, that many districts aren't using policies that work. And a good first step in that, Madam Chairman, is to figure out what policies do work by bringing together experts in the space and having meetings and really trying to track that down. We as a committee didn't feel comfortable being explicit or proscriptive in setting what those standards should be. We wanted it to organically grow from that expertise and recognize that it might change over time. So hopefully, if those from the public that came and provided testimony kind of dig into the language and wording, they'll be comfortable that we're trying to accomplish the objectives that they expressed concern regarding. So with that, I'll support the legislation, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Is there any further discussion from the committee? Questions been called on the bill? Would you please call the roll?
Senator Beitman? Senator Brennan? Senator Rothfuss? Senator Steinmetz? Chairman Scott?
Excused.
4 ayes, 1 excused.
The bill has passed. It was Senate File 48, Education Suspension and Expulsion Model Policies. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 49, and we will welcome the good Senator Ellis to come and present this bill to us.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I have served on the Education Committee for 6 years, so this is my first time being on this side of it. And so I'm happy to go over the reasoning of Senate File 49 and explain what the bill does. But essentially, about this time last year, I had started receiving calls from a number of parents who had students that were playing high school football in Cheyenne and were feeling like they were being bullied by their coach. And some people, had reached out to me, oh, are you getting involved? Are these snowflake parents? And I can assure you that as a mom of 3, I'm a busy lady. I work full time. I don't have time to go worry about whether or not kids are getting playtime or not getting playtime. This isn't about the athletics scene at all or snowflake kids in any manner. This is about a very serious situation where students on a football team were actually being harassed by their coach and retaliated against when their parents spoke up. And so the same group of parents hired some attorneys to see what kind of information they could get about what was being done. They filed complaints with the school district. There was a mysterious investigation that proceeded, not a lot of light on what happened at the end of the investigation. And I had parents asking me, what is being done about this? And I said, I don't know. So a representative from Cheyenne and I sent a letter to our school district really trying to get some information. And because of privacy laws, we received very little. And so on the back end of this, I think that there was some kind of investigation, there was some kind of disciplinary discussion. In talking with parents, heard concerns that their students were actually retaliated against and that the behavior worsened by the coach. And not unlike other abusive situations, there was practices of really favoring certain players over others. But this bled over to the classroom. This particular coach also is a teacher within the district. So going into the 2022 interim, we wanted to investigate some options of how we could maybe provide some more transparency. One of those suggestions was to, try and look at our Public Records Act. Those discussions really produced no legislation. But one thing that did emerge was the fact that parents wanted to at least acknowledge that, are you looking at our anti-bullying statutes to make it clear that those bullying statutes apply not only from student to student, but it could apply from teacher to student or vice versa. Once this, and I'll be very candid with you, I didn't, out of privacy and respect for the parents and players, I did not contact the media, but there was an open records request. And so I provided you with 2 articles that were related about this incident. And so I don't want to get into great detail because I certainly don't want, the coaches or administrators to identify students and cause more harm to these individuals. But that's really the impetus for this bill. Once this article came out, I started receiving calls from other parents who had expressed similar concerns about their particular basketball teams, concerns from parents and students about how they were treated by their dance coaches and fat shaming. And so really, I think we need to shine a light on what's going on. I think one other troubling thing that I heard about and saw, someone sent me a screenshot, was an employee of our district who was taunting a student within our Laramie County School District on Facebook. So that's what this bill seeks to do, Madam Vice Chair. It says under 21-4-313, these are our anti-bullying statutes. It tries to make clear that no person, which does include students or school district employees, administrators, or volunteers, shall engage in bullying. Going on to page 2, under 21-4-314, it says here that each school district shall adopt a policy prohibiting, at a minimum, harassment, intimidation, or bullying at school. And you'll see the new language inserted on lines 11 through 14. The policy shall address harassment, intimidation, or bullying occurring or received at school committed by any person, including but not limited to students, school district employees, administrators, or volunteers. So you'll see this language repeated onto the bottom of page 2 and then onto page 3. We had some discussion about the adequacy of relying on information received through anonymous reports. So there's a new language that you'll see on lines 10 and 11 on page 3, just saying that we want school districts to be a little bit more clear on how they're going to handle information received through anonymous tips. And so really the rest of the bill is pretty conforming. On page 3, line 20, you'll see that we are asking these, the Department of Education, by no later than September 1st of 2023, develop model policies to assist in this effort. And then going on to page 4, we struck on line 10, significant contact. Here, we felt that the word significant was a little ambiguous. So anytime a district employee or volunteer who has contact with the student, just making that clarification that we don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily need to be significant because we don't know what that means. So then the act would take effect on July 1st, 2023. Happy to answer any questions.
Committee, do we have any questions for Senator Ellis? Questions? All right, we'll let you go for now, but if we have questions later, we may call you back. Thank you very much. All right. Is there anyone from the agency that would like to comment on this bill?
Good morning, Chairman Steinmetz. My name is Wanda Maloney. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at the Wyoming Department of Education. This morning, we stand ready to update this policy as it changes. One suggestion we would like to make on page 3, as you look at page and line 22 and 23, it does reference develop model policies applicable to grades kindergarten through 12 and teacher preparation program standards on the identification and prevention of bullying. This was in the original statute, and our suggestion is that the teacher preparation program standards do not fall within the Department of Education. And so we would ask for revisions to that language.
Okay, could you go over where that was located for me again? I don't think I found it right off.
Sure. Chairman Steinmetz, it's on page 3, line 22 and 23.
Okay, and what was your suggested change?
The suggestion change would be either to strike through the teacher preparation program standards or
Okay.
to change that to teacher professional development
Okay,
on identification and prevention of bullying.
thank you for going over that for me again. Okay, all right, are there any questions for the Department of Education? Senator Rothfuss?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the last two suggestions, I take your point. We didn't talk about that during the interim. I'd feel more comfortable amending than striking. And you suggested teacher professional development. We wouldn't have professional development standards. Would that be programs or guidance, or what would you call your professional development?
Chairman Steinmetz and Senator Rothfuss, following the next, on the next page, page 4, lines 1, 2, and 3, it does, the department shall provide necessary training programs and technical assistance to districts in carrying out this act. So it does further expect that we would provide necessary training programs.
Madam Chairman, follow up? But is there a way that we can rephrase, and maybe you said it and I missed it, but teacher professional development instead of preparation program standards? Guidance or professional development programs? How would we phrase that? How did you phrase that as the substitution?
Chairman Steinmetz, Senator Rothfuss, I like the word guidance, teacher guidance
Teacher
on
professional-
identification and prevention
right.
of bullying.
Thank you.
All right, are there any further questions? All right, thank you so much. We'll open public comment on this bill. Is there anyone to comment in the room on this bill? Okay. Come right up.
Good morning again. Kathy Sigliano, again, a parent here with LCSD1 and with Moms for Liberty. I'm here to discuss the School Climate and Safe School Act, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. I will say that I don't understand why in this day and age, when these things can be done in a more harmful manner, such as online and through apps on kids' phones, school districts have taken such a lighter approach on this. Like I said previously, when I was in school, you were lucky to get 2 chances if you were acting up in any way in school. In the section under 2023 State of Wyoming 23LSO-0243, the school district shall involve parents and guardians, school employees, volunteers, students, administrators, and community representatives in the process of creating the policy. The policy shall address harassment, intimidation, or bullying occurring or received at school committed by any person, including but not limited to students, school or district employees, administrators, and volunteers. Policies created under this section shall be continuously reviewed and may be revised as necessary. The policy prohibiting harassment, intimidation, or bullying shall include without limitation consequences and appropriate remedial actions for persons. Who follows up with that? Will it be the state superintendent? Will it be the legislator? Will it be this committee? We as parents already know that things like this get lost in the shuffle. I personally know from experiences. I have also been told from others that this kind of thing gets swept under the rug. Districts will underreport issues because they know it will make their schools look bad. LCSD1 our prior school board passed a resolution last April on these very topics, and still there has been no consequence for causing harm to others, either by harassment, bullying, intimidation, or even by threats. I ask you, what is the legal definition of bullying, harassment, and intimidation? If you are serious about passing this, then it needs to define that. There's no room for interpretation. It can be that I didn't affirm your lifestyle choices and you got offended, and someone may consider that harassment. There's got to be room for people to agree to disagree. I don't know what the answer is to this issue, but I will say you can't legislate how people feel, and it certainly can't be controlled. Sorry. You can't legislate how people feel, and it certainly can't control what they do with it. If there's not going to be any true consequence, this is nothing but fluff to make someone feel better and say that they got something passed. I do have a copy of the resolution that our local school board passed. I did not make copies, but I can send that to some of you. I do remember what Senator Ellis spoke of. And like I said, there have been a lot of parents in lots of discussions. There actually was just one 2 days ago on Facebook that a mom reached out to Facebook locally asking what she can do about her daughter being bullied, that she's brought it to the attention of principals, and they just kind of say there's nothing that they can do. The child, the boy that is harassing this girl, basically got, I guess, suspended for 2 or 3 days, but when he came back, he basically told her that he had a nice vacation. Obviously, if there's no consequence from the parents why a kid gets suspended for the reasons at school, they're obviously going to consider it a vacation. I'll go back to just kind of what I discussed in the previous bill. There has to be consequence, whether it's a student, an employee, a para, someone that's volunteering at the school, it doesn't matter. I think we're giving off a very bad look if kids can just assume they can get away with anything in school. My 8th grader tells me that kids will get sent to the office by calling teachers names, harassing kids, making threats, making kill lists. Whether it's a joke or not, those things have to have consequence, and they can't just be sent back to class. So I think this needs to be defined better. What these definitions, I think we're trying to say are being considered as harassment and intimidation, and I think threats need to be included in there somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And any questions from the committee? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So one thing in the way that we structure the bills is we don't always include the relevant information, and I was wondering if you had a chance to look at the prior statute where the definitions reside for bullying, intimidation, harassment. Okay. And I'll, if you want to follow up with me afterwards, I'll get you that.
Okay.
Does that sound good? Because
Yeah.
I'm not saying the definitions are good. I'm just saying they exist. And so there might be some room, Madam Chairman, if there's concerns that they're not robust enough, it would probably be within our title to work on that. But I'll point you to those and make sure that you have those available.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yes, and just to follow up on that, it's not a question, but just a comment. I'm going to take the liberty that I think these bills are trying to head in the direction that you want to go as well. I think we're all amenable to that. And so as we continue to work together with your newly formed group, I think that we can make some headway on these issues. Okay, all right. Next, any further questions for our, okay, so next, a public testimony, please.
Okay, Mark Moody, also with Moms for Liberty. Just real quick, I did pass out the title statute. It was for stalking and penalty, but if you look at the number 2 under 1A and 1.2, it does say what harassment is. I was just thinking that could be something maybe placed in there by line 11 and 12 saying, defining what harassment is. That's really all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Any questions from the committee? We will let you take the liberty this time.
Sorry, this is the first time I've ever done this, so.
Well, you're doing great.
Thanks. I will say too, it's great to have policy and procedure. We just need to make sure it's being followed. We have lots of that. We have lots of policy. We have lots of stuff on paper. And like I said, the board here locally passed a resolution back in April. And if you talk to a lot of the parents that are experiencing these issues, it was just something put on paper. So making sure policy and procedures actually being followed and our school district, the administration are following through with those things that are on this, on any paper that they're presenting would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any further public testimony on this bill? Do we have anyone on Zoom today that would like to testify? There is no one on Zoom. Seeing no further public testimony, committee will close the public comment and committee will ask you what your pleasure is on the bill.
Move the bill to pass.
The bill's been moved by Senator Rothfuss, seconded by Senator Beitman. We will go to amendments now. Are there any amendments on page 1? Seeing none, page 2. Yes?
I
Senator
think
Rothfuss.
it's worth having a discussion, and it would be an amendment in about 3 places, but it was something that we made a decision on during the interim not to include, but I think it's appropriate for us to have the discussion here, and we heard further comment, which is in our list of who the policy should apply to, where you see that right now on page 2, lines 13 and 14, for example, including but not limited to students, school or district employees, administrators, and volunteers. We discussed whether or not to include parents on there, as to whether each school district, each local board should include in their policy. And we didn't include it because it's really challenging, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, is how do you write that policy and what authority do you have over it? But we also know at the same time, and we heard, I think a few minutes ago, an example where parents cyberbully other people's kids. We know that happens. And it's certainly in order for us to add that or not add that, but I just wanted to raise it because Senator Beitman and I were involved in that debate, but others on the committee weren't. So I thought I would put that out there as an option. And I don't know, Madam Chairman, which way you want, or Senator Brennan, which way you'd want to go, or Senator Beitman, but I just wanted to raise that for a little bit of discussion. If we want to put in parents, it's a simple comma, parents, comma, in about 2 places. If we don't, that's okay too. And I won't make the motion. I'll let somebody else if you want to, and if you don't, then we'll move on, because I think it's in good shape now, and it's, as you see, including but not limited to, so it doesn't preclude a board from doing that if they chose to. But I wanted to raise the concept.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Those of us who didn't have the benefit of the interim work appreciate that. I would like to bring Senator Ellis back up to hear her comments on that, and if the committee will indulge us, I'd love to hear her comments on that.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. During the interim, we actually heard some really troubling testimony from one of our members, Representative Harshman. His son played football in high school, and actually, parents from opposing teams said, "You should kill yourself," to that player. Troubling. At the end of the day, I believe I didn't support including the word parents, because in my view and my concern is district's ability and accountability. They do have that over their employees. And I think that, there's a clear relationship there and an obligation when you've got that employment circumstance. For all the reasons that Senator mentioned, or the good senator mentioned, I think including parents is a difficult challenge. Certainly districts, I think if they see parents harassing opposing players at sporting events, should have the ability to, remove those individuals. But I think having blanket policies, I just didn't think it was appropriate to have in statutes, and maybe is more appropriately decided at the local level.
Thank you, Senator Ellis.
And then, Madam Co-Chair, or
Yes.
Vice Chair, if I could just add, this isn't perfect. I think there are a lot of areas where we should be looking at our statutes further. But this really was in the vein of having some accountability, because as a mom, I worry about making sure that when I send my children off to high school and they're exposed to these teachers, this is the concern, is what kind of people are interacting with our students. And so it's about professionalism. And then to the point about following up, I had so many questions. Whatever happened? Whatever happened? Did he ever get disciplined? Was there ever any action taken? Can I feel better as a parent about trusting this individual with my child? That's a black hole. So that's something that we talked about a lot during the interim, and we didn't land on a consensus. We didn't end up with a bill. So I just want to acknowledge this isn't a silver bullet by any stretch, but in visiting with the parents in advance of today's meeting, I think that the parents I talked to who were involved in these conversations thought that this bill did have value in at least being able to clarify. One thing we also heard Representative Newsom during the interim said, but it says all persons. Shouldn't that cover this list that we've identified? And that's where the problem arose. Our district said, no, these bullying statutes really apply to student-on-student conduct. So thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me allow to offer those clarifying remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Senator Ellis while she's there? All right. No, you're fine. Thank you. All right. We will see if anyone's wanting to make that motion. I personally wouldn't be in favor of it, but at this time. All right. And we always have a chance to amend from the floor. So, all right. So that covers page 2. We're on to page 3. Are there any? Yes, Senator Rothfus.
Madam Chair, I move to amend on page 3, line 22. After teacher, strike preparation, program, and strike standards on line 23, and insert professional development guidance, so that it would read, beginning on 21, develop model policies applicable to grades kindergarten through 12, and teacher professional development guidance on the identification and prevention of bullying.
Is there a second? Moved by Senator Rothfuss, seconded by Senator Beitman. I just want to make sure our secretaries captured that. Are you good? All right.
Yes, Senator, I am.
All right. Is there any discussion on the amendments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion to amend has passed. Any further amendments on page 4? Seeing none, committee, would you like to make any remarks or have any discussion about the bill? Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess to address the concern of the follow through and how do you hold the school districts accountable for not following through, I feel, it's my opinion, that ultimately the voters have the final say. We elect our school board members, and if they're not doing the job, it's incumbent upon the local community to get out and get people to run for school board that will hold people accountable. We can't be kind of the backstop for every local community, every local school district, and solve all their problems here at the legislature. There is some element of local control that we have to respect and trust the process works. It may not be as fast as we like. It takes a couple of years to turn over a school board, but that ultimately is where the accountability lies, is with us, the parents and the community members. So that's why I'm an aye on this bill, and ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Beitman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Senator Beitman.
Aye.
Senator Brennan. Senator Rothfuss. Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Scott. 4 ayes, 1 excused.